Most people watching this video are going to miss one of the biggest wealth-building opportunities of their lifetime. And the worst part is, they won't even realize it until it's already gone. Years from now, they'll look back wishing they had started earlier, wishing they had understood what was right in front of them. But by then, time will have already done its damage. Because here's the truth no one tells you clearly enough. Wealth isn't built in one big moment. It's built quietly, slowly, and then suddenly all at once. And right now, you're standing at the exact point where that process either begins or gets delayed. Most people will wait. They'll say they need more money, more knowledge, or a better time. And that delay will cost them years of compounding they can never get back. But a small group of people, the ones who act now, will use this moment to set something in motion that grows far beyond what they can imagine today. What I'm about to show you is not complicated, but it is time sensitive. And once you truly understand it, you'll never look at time, money, or opportunity the same way again. Here's the part that almost nobody explains properly. Most people have heard of compounding. They've seen the charts, the quotes, maybe even that famous line about it being the eighth wonder of the world. On the surface, it sounds simple. Invest money, let it grow, and over time, it multiplies. But if that were enough, everyone would be wealthy by now. The reality is very different, and it comes down to one critical misunderstanding. Compounding isn't just about investing. It's about when you start and how you behave after you start. And this is where most people quietly sabotage their own future without even realizing it. They delay. They wait for a better salary, a better market, a better moment. Or they jump in inconsistently, stopping and starting based on how they feel. And each of those decisions chips away at the one thing compounding needs the most, which is uninterrupted time. What makes this dangerous is that the cost isn't visible immediately. You don't feel it in the moment when you decide to wait another year. But that 1 year doesn't just delay your progress by 12 months, it removes an entire layer of future growth that could have multiplied over decades. The earlier years are not just important, they are disproportionately powerful. Nobody tells you this clearly enough. They focus on returns, percentages, and strategies, but they ignore the timing behavior that actually determines the outcome. And by the time most people realize this, they're already years behind where they could have been. Let me show you what this really looks like in a way that's impossible to ignore. Imagine two people who make a simple decision about money, but at very different times in their lives. Person A starts early. They don't have a high income, they don't feel completely ready, but they decide to invest 5,000 rupees every month starting in their early 20s. They stay consistent for 10 years, and then life gets busy. Maybe responsibilities increase, maybe priorities shift, and they stop investing altogether. No more contributions after that point. They simply leave their money in the market and let it grow. Now, look at person B. They do what most people do. They wait. They tell themselves they'll start when they earn more, when things feel stable, when they feel confident. So they delay for 10 years. Then, in their early 30s, they begin investing 5,000 rupees every month, just like person A did. But they're disciplined. They continue investing not for 10 years, but for 25 years straight, all the way into their late 50s. If you only look at effort, person B clearly did more. They invested for a longer period, they put in more total money, and they stayed consistent for decades. It feels like they should end up far ahead, but when you actually run the numbers with a reasonable long-term return, something surprising happens. Person A, the one who invested for only 10 years and then stopped, often ends up with more wealth than person B. Why does this happen? Because the money person A invested had more time to compound. Those early contributions didn't just grow, they grew on top of growth again and again for decades. By the time person B even started, person A's investments had already begun accelerating. Compounding had already picked up speed. This is the part that hits people hard. It's not about how much you invest, at least not in the beginning. It's about how early your money gets the chance to start working. Time is not just a factor in compounding. It is the factor. You can always increase your income later. You can always invest more in the future, but you can never go back and give your money more time. And once you see it this way, it changes how you think about delay. Waiting is not neutral. It's not harmless. Every year you wait is a year your future wealth loses the chance to multiply. The difference between starting now and starting 5 or 10 years later is not small. It's the difference between your money working for you or having to work much harder to catch up for the rest of your life. This is why the idea that time is more powerful than amount isn't just a motivational line. It's a mathematical reality. And once you understand that, the real question becomes uncomfortable but necessary. If starting earlier creates such
such a massive advantage, then what is waiting really costing you right now? There's a deeper layer to this that most people never fully understand, and it quietly shapes the outcome of everything we've been talking about. Compounding does not reward intensity, it rewards consistency, and that one idea alone is enough to completely change how you approach building wealth. Most people think about investing the way they think about effort in other areas of life. They assume that if they just go harder later, they can make up for what they didn't do earlier. So they delay. They tell themselves a story that sounds reasonable on the surface. I'll invest when I earn more. I'll start when I can put in bigger amounts. I'll do it properly later. And because that story feels logical, they don't question it. But compounding doesn't care about your intentions. It doesn't reward you for planning to invest. It only responds to time in the market and the consistency of your actions. When you delay, you're not just postponing progress, you're removing entire layers of growth that could have stacked on top of each other over time. And once those layers are gone, no amount of future intensity can fully replace them. Think about it this way. When you invest early, even with small amounts, your money starts building a foundation. That foundation grows, and then future growth builds on top of that. Over time, it creates a kind of momentum that becomes harder and harder to replicate if you start late. On the other hand, when you wait and then try to compensate by investing larger amounts, you're starting from zero at a point when compounding should already be accelerating. You're asking your money to sprint when it hasn't even had the chance to walk. This is what I call the time leverage effect. It's the hidden force behind compounding that most people overlook. Time acts like a multiplier on every rupee you invest. The earlier that rupee enters the system, the more leverage it has. It doesn't just grow once. It grows, and then that growth grows again, and that growth grows again, creating layers that stack over years and decades. When you invest later, you're not just losing time, you're losing leverage. And once you see it through this lens, something shifts in how you think. Smart investors don't wait for perfect conditions. They don't wait until they feel ready or until they can invest large amounts. They understand that the most valuable thing they have is not money, it's time. So they start small, but they start early. They treat consistency as the real driver of results, not intensity. This is why two people with very different incomes can end up in opposite positions later in life. The one who started early with small, steady contributions often builds far more wealth than the one who waited and then tried to compensate with bigger investments. It's not because they worked harder, it's because they used time more effectively. There's also a psychological trap hidden inside the idea of waiting for more money. It creates a false sense of productivity. You feel like you're being responsible, like you're preparing to do things the right way. But in reality, you're delaying the one thing that actually matters most. And the longer that delay continues, the harder it becomes to start. At some point, you have to recognize that the perfect moment is not coming. There will always be a reason to wait, a reason to hesitate, a reason to think you can do better later. But compounding doesn't wait for your circumstances to improve. It only works with what you give it and when you give it. So the real shift is this. Stop thinking about investing as something you'll do when you're ready, and start thinking of it as something you begin immediately, even if it feels small. Because in the world of compounding, small and early will almost always beat big and late. And once you understand that, you're no longer playing the same game as everyone else. So, what do you actually do with all of this? Because understanding compounding is one thing, but using it correctly is something else entirely. And this is where most people get stuck. They understand the idea, they agree with it, but they never turn it into action. So let's make this simple, practical, and impossible to ignore. The first step is to start immediately, even if it feels small. This is where most people hesitate. They think they need a large amount to begin. They imagine investing as something serious that requires thousands at a time, and because they can't meet that expectation, they delay. But that belief is exactly what keeps them stuck. You don't need a large amount. You need a starting point. Even something as small as 100 rupees a day is enough to begin. Think about that for a moment. That's less than what many people spend without thinking on things that don't compound, don't grow, and don't come back. But when that same 100 rupees is invested consistently, it becomes the seed of something much bigger. Not because of the amount, but because of the habit it creates. What you're really building in the beginning is not wealth. You're building consistency. You're training yourself to show up, to invest invest regularly and to treat it as a non-negotiable part of your life. And once that habit is in place, increasing the amount later becomes easy. But if you wait for the perfect amount before starting, you delay the habit, and without the habit, nothing else follows. The second step is to automate your investing and use a strategy called dollar cost averaging. This sounds technical, but it's actually very simple. Instead of trying to guess the perfect time to invest, you invest a fixed amount at regular intervals, every week or every month, regardless of what the market is doing. This does two powerful things at the same time. First, it removes emotion from the equation. You don't have